This is purge, purify, and renew your mind, and by extension, our minds. Purge, purify, and renew your mind, and by extension, our minds. And we're coming to you once again from the backwoods, muddy waters, sugar ditches, and mosquito swamps of Greenville and Delta, Mississippi. And we're in the studio of MC Productions, and brother quote-unquote mic check. Brother Willie Colbert is the great engineer, the cameraman, and as I always say, multi-talented. And without his creativity, expertise, his know-how, and so forth and so on, we could not and would not be doing these videos, especially under the name that we're working with now, Purge. Once again, purge, purify, and renew your mind, and by extension, our minds. As I said, it's been a while, but many things that have been on my mind, and I know there are many things that we all could talk about or we could have a conversation about, but one of the pushing topics for the last week or so in my mind has been the question of power. And some of the things that will be said today, I don't have no any written plan out or no really serious guideline that I'm following, but this is like just trying to give a brief introduction or raise the question in terms in our consciousness about questioning what is power. And I know many of us have many different angles and way of defining and looking at what we call power. And I have recognized over the years, you know, you can be in a room filled with a multitude of people, and the speaker take the platform and start talking about the words or the concept or the ideas of power and wealth. It seems to me a quietness come over the audience just hearing the words power and wealth. And I think most times, and then it seems to be that in terms of power, the word power or the term power, most people have, as I perceive it to be, a negative idea about power, because many of us, in more ways than one, individually and collectively, have experienced the abuse of power by certain authoritarian figures or authoritarian groups or authoritarian government or various institutions that we interact with most of the days of our lives. So, but power in and of itself is good. Power in and of itself is not a negative. Matter of fact, power, when properly understood, power itself is pervasive. It's everywhere. All life depends on what we call power. And that which doesn't have power can consider to be dead, unalive, lifeless, formless. So power is what's called power is the essence of life. Think about it. Power is the essence of life. And so the topic is, once again, is just a brief introduction to what is power. And this video is not intended to be long and drawn out, but just to ask the question and make a few random thoughts or statements concerning power, and hopefully these random comments or statements and some quotes that may be read are connected enough to bring about an understanding, a foundational understanding about what is power. And most times, you know, in this age of what we call Aquarius, you know what I mean, the focus seems to be more now, and rightly so. You know, you hear people talking about self-care or doing their own thing, getting themselves together, and rightly so. It should be. But in the context that I'm trying to lay this out or speak about what is power, I'm talking about or will be making reference in this video and those to follow that not only personal power, but social power. The personal and the social go together. They go together. Think about that. Do a little homework, a little research on that, and sit down in quiet meditation and focus on and concentrate on the idea of personal power and social power. And when I say social power, I mean you can reflect on the sociability of a family, social power, social aspect of a group, and on in terms of social. So, in terms of the personal, each of us is like in my opinion, an electromagnetic cell or a battery of power in the personal sense, in the so-called individual sense. And by the way, in my opinion, right, in my opinion, there's no individual, quote unquote individual, in the absolute sense of the term. Each of us as so-called individuals, we are social beings. Even though we have the potential power, personal power to be expressed potentially, and we express it on a day-to-day basis. And if it wasn't expressed as a so-called individual, we would not have that power. We could not have the capacity or the ability to exist, to do. We could not have or would not have the ability and capacity to do and to prevail. It would be a spiritual, mathematical, and scientific impossibility. So personal power and self-empowerment is key. And in my opinion, once again, most of the things I will be saying now and later is in my opinion. In my opinion, this self-empowerment or personal power is one of the main ingredients that we seem to have overlooked during our quest for justice, equality, and so-called freedom as a people in the so-called concrete jungles and wilderness of North America during our sojourn here, and especially during the height of the 60s. Most of our leaders that were before us, that were knocking on particular doors of government and other institutions, you know, they were seeking for us as a people, our idea or understanding at the time of freedom as a group, as a people, freedom, justice, and equity. And some inroads were made. We did not reach the mountaintop of true liberation, right? True freedom, true equity, true justice right now in this country. But one of the key or main ingredients, in my opinion, that wasn't emphasized enough was the self-empowerment, the so-called personal, individual empowerment. And in this day and time, what we call the age of the glorious, the golden and glorious age of Aquarius, which is 2,000, each age is 2,160 years. And we have entered into that age and have come out of what was called the Piscean age, 2,160 years, right? The Piscean age of so-called duality, the Piscean age of, control and domination by institutions, by other groups. The age of domination of from this, that, and the other. But even though that age has passed, in my opinion, it's still on its deathbed. The effects of it, the effects and the effects are still with us. The negative effects are still with us. In the age of Aquarius, supposed to be, right, is written about, supposed to be the age of greater unity consciousness, greater health, greater wealth, greater prosperity, and so forth and so on for one and all. But we are just, to me, on the cutting edge of that. So the effects of the previous age, the negative effects are still with us. It's on its deathbed. Humanity is not free of that, if you understand. So there's still work to do. And we should not give up the so-called individual and the social or collective. They go together. It's like two sides of one coin. The personal and the collective. Matter of fact, the personal and the collective, that's an original, aboriginal, indigenous, Alkebulan, so-called African ideal or principle. The so-called individual can become all who or she needs to be, but it's within the context of the group, of the collective, the family, the nation. We shouldn't give that up. Matter of fact, you look around and we still see different groups have been and are still operating as a group, as a team. They see themselves as a team. But something has happened to our psychology that we haven't overcome yet. We looked at by other groups as a team. Regardless if we like it or not, we looked at as a team. And our team appeared to be, in the eyes of ourselves, many of us, and other groups, as a losing team. In one sense, simply because we don't see ourselves as a team. A cooperating and competitive team. But we understand that idea on other levels. We look at football teams that we be shouting for, rooting for. We look at basketball teams. I mean, we see it going on all around us. We understand. We can't say that we don't understand. We understand the principle of team. And these different teams, and we can look at, compare it as ethnic groups, they wearing the same suit because they see themselves as a team. And they competing, they cooperating first of all as a team, and they competing against other groups as a team. And they unified. And they come together or rallying around the same game plan or concept or idea, rules and regulations of how they function and operate as a team. So what has happened to our psychology? What's wrong with our psychology? There's nothing wrong to view oneself as a so-called individual, as a part of a group. Who told us that lie? Why we accept that lie? Those are questions. And there's nothing wrong with that. The family is a group. I mean, do we have so-called individuals or the members of a family doing all that's good and beneficial for other families and doing less for themselves as a family unit? If they are, something is wrong with that. That's not logical. That's not natural. And any members in a family that's operating with that idea, something wrong with the psychology. The mentality has been damaged. Even though we may be in denial. But something wrong with that idea. We've been psyched out. Brainwashed against our own selves if we operate in that way. So bottom line, there's nothing wrong with that. That's natural. And when we look at, in terms of humanity, back to this idea or principle of individualism, as I stated, there's no true individual in the absolute sense of the word. We social beings even as an individual. Think over that. We can't escape that. Not one of us, even though it takes personal individual effort and understanding to move about, to desire things, to seek to achieve things. But we do that in relationship to others. You know, some of us may say, I'm going to my job to make some money. Well, do you own the job as a business? Most of us, the mass of people, don't. So you dependent on someone to have a job there for you to go to work. That's dependency there. You go to a grocery store. You say, I'm going to take my money out of my bank account and go to the store and get some food, get some groceries, get some bread, get a can of beans, a can of corn that Brother Mike Check was talking to me about earlier as being a hybrid. So we have this ability to do that, but it's in conjunction with someone else, with others. We go to the store believing with the faith and confidence that what we seeking is on the shelves of the grocery store. Matter of fact, we have the confidence that the store itself is there. So for the food, the grocery to be on the shelf or in the store, it had to get there. That's another dependency. Someone had to manufacture it. Someone had to grow the bread, the wheat in the ground. And we don't even know these individuals on a personal level. That's a form of interdependency. You may be a great singer, jazz singer, blues singer, rap artist, but you depending on others to work with you to have the expertise to set up the apparatus so that you can express your great singing ability. Everywhere we turn in what we call human life, our what we create and what we our destruction, what we destroy. It may be individuals, but it's a group of individuals all at the same time. We as humanity, we create and we destroy, individually and collectively. So we need to stop running. And when we think and conceive of power, still in this time of the so-called age of Aquarius, and still feeling the effects of the Piscean age, we need to still look at and contemplate and bring into positive operation, personal and collective, self-empowerment and group empowerment to get things done on a higher level. I made a post the other day, and it was like a retake on a Facebook post I made years ago, and I continue to say it and state it in different ways, regardless of how spiritual we may consider ourselves, regardless of how metaphysical or esoteric we may consider ourselves. I don't know, maybe you do, but I don't know or not aware of one person who doesn't, in this three-dimensional, who doesn't eat, drink, sleep, urinate, and defecate. Regardless of how spiritual and metaphysical and esoteric they consider themselves to be. I don't know not one person in this three-dimensional. I mean, we can travel, astral travel in our minds. That's good and fine. But our bodies, and we still live, move, and have our beingness in what's called the three-dimensional. So you find, and let me know, one person who doesn't eat, drink, sleep, urinate, and defecate in this three-dimensional, regardless of how spiritual they may be. But in relationship to power and definition, I'm looking at one quote here from Dr. Claude Anderson, who wrote the book Powernomics. It's kind of worn and torn. But he also wrote a few other books and another classic book called, I think it was Black Label, White Wealth, something to the effect. That was one of his first books. But his definition in Powernomics is this. Power is the ability, it's a simple definition. Power is the ability to get things done despite the resistance and opposition of others. It's an ability. It's a capacity. And we all have that in the social sense. This ability and capacity. And that ability or potentiality and capacity is more concentrated and raised to a higher level when it's done in a collectivity, in a group-wise, a group effort with others. When you bring like atoms, like the compounding atoms, you know, when they get together, you raising up, intensifying the power. And that's in relationship to what I was saying about the individual and the collective once again. But this ability, this capacity is enhanced, right, in conjunction with others of like mind. When we harmonize and unify with others of like mind. That's why I said, and I'll talk about it probably in the next episode, about the family unit is a power system. Weak or strong, functional or dysfunctional, it still is a unit of power, weak or strong. But when that family unit, those members of that family, sees themselves as a power system with abilities and capabilities, begin to work in unison and harmonize themselves for the greater good, that become a strong family. You can call that a strong family. And then it's matter of fact, there's an African proverb that says a strong family is like an army. A strong family is like an army. And I don't just mean from a military point of view. I mean that strong family that's working in harmony and balance. They got a strong economy that we call the economics. They got probably some form of economic independence. They got their politics, the way that they have agreed to relate to one to the other. That's their politics. That's political. And political is not just limited to government. I recall one of our ancestors, Dr. Frances Cress Wilson, she used to state a lot about any relationship, two or more that consisting of two or more people, right? That's political. Because with that two or more people, power, what we call power, and properly understood, is being exercised. A relationship between a parent and a child, that's a political relationship. That's a relationship of power. But power, in terms of relationship, can be either positive or negative. And it is positive or negative because we got human choice there. But it's still a power relationship. Two or more people is a political relationship. I remember another ancestor, Paul Robeson, years ago, and reading some of his life and legacy of Paul Robeson and his work. He said that his politics was the freedom of his people. His politics as an individual was the freedom of his people. That's what Paul Robeson said. And you probably can read about many others who have stated some relevant and much necessary information and points of view for our, upliftment of our mentality and the increase of our understanding, our understanding, and our overstanding. But Dr. King himself said, I'm reading right now, a quote, said that in his book, which I have before me, if I can find it right now, just to show you where it's coming from. I Have a Dream, this is the name of the book. Writings and Speeches That Changed the World. But in this book, on page 154, Dr. King says, and I quote, when a people are mired means stuck in oppression, they realize deliverance only when they have accumulated the power to enforce change. To enforce change, to bring about change. And what Dr. King meaning there is positive and progressive change. That's what he's alluding to. When a people are stuck in oppression, they realize deliverance only when they have accumulated the power, the social power, the collective power to, as a people, to enforce change, positive and progressive change. He goes on to say, and referring to us as a people, you know, at that time they used the word Negroes, but Dr. King says the necessary task of so-called Negroes today is to rediscover, in my opinion, how to organize our strengths into compelling power. That's Dr. King. Into compelling power. How to organize, rediscover how to organize. Power, social power has to be organized. It just don't happen. It just don't fall out of the sky or come roaring in on the clouds. We have to have the consciousness to organize power, social power. It's not just given. It doesn't come from begging other people or begging the powers that be, so-called powers that be, begging government. We have to organize and bring about power, the power that we need to enforce or bring about positive and progressive change in our so-called individual and collective lives. Going back to the Greek part of that greeting that I stated at the beginning about Ubuntu. Ubuntu being an East African word or concept that goes something like, you know, I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. And as it's stated, you know, in the highways and byways of life, on the streets, you know, there's no me without you. There's no you without me. We in this together. We can't escape the personal harmonizing with the group or the collective. And you can expand that to the best interest of humanity. This is what's at stake. We must understand and comprehend this. Pardon me for a minute. And I just want to put on record or introduce another powerful book that goes along with the other two I just made reference to, by Dr. Amos Wilson. His book on power, blueprint for what he called black power. But we're talking about power itself. You know, and as a people, you know, that's referred to as black, we know that we Aboriginal, indigenous, Archebulan, Moors, so-called African people. I mean, we can just know who we talking about. And the subtitle, a moral, political, and economic imperative necessity for the 21st century, the 21st century. And I would add to the subtitle, a moral, spiritual, political, and economic imperative or necessity for the 21st century. But anyway, on page 5 of this book, chapter 1, he says, power comes with being, with interactive existence, and being alive. It is the very essence of life and the motive force for growth and development and of adaptability to living things, to environmental changes and demands. Power refers to the ability and the capacity to do, the ability and the capacity to be, and the ability and capacity to prevail. Wow. Beingness and aliveness originate with power. To be powerless is to be willless, impotent, and lifeless. Wow. Without effect, whether personally, individually, or socially, without effect or influence, to be nothing, of no account. And he goes on to say he agreed with the psychologist Rollo May, and he quotes Rollo May, and I read the quote: power is essential for all living things. Man, woman in particularly, cast on this barren crust of earth eons ago with the hope and the requirement that he or she survive, finds he or she must use his or her power and confront opposing forces of life at every point in his or her struggle with the earth and with his fellow beings, unquote. That's powerful. And as I begin to wrap this episode up, and I hope what I stated brought some understanding, some deeper understanding, some deeper overstanding, some deeper understanding to those of you who have brought yourselves to interconnect and listen to what we have to say at this time on Purge, Purify, and Renew Your Mind, and by extension, our minds, coming to you once again, as always, out of the heart, the backwoods, muddy waters and sugar ditches and mosquito swamps of Greenville and Delta, Mississippi. This is where it's coming from. Last quote from the same book by Dr. Amos Wilson. It goes on to say like this: those of us who may be in denial, we deny the ubiquity of power to our peril. Power in and of itself, as I stated, is pervasive. The essence of it is good. He says, it does not vanish from reality or lose its influence by our refusal or the denial to acknowledge its existence. Therefore, we are behooved to recognize its permanent reality and make the best of it, control it, and use it to good purpose. Power in and of itself can be both a detrimental and beneficial aspect of social relations, and even of our so-called personal self, which has been socialized, and can be made to play the negative as well as the positive role in the constitution of humans' social life. Power can be utilized to achieve personal, social, political, and material ends if it is appropriately developed, organized, and applied. The question of whether power is beneficial or harmful can be answered in regards to the specific use to which it is put in a particular situation. Wow. Moreover, there are many, he says, so-called black people, Aboriginal, I'm saying indigenous, Moors, African people, who have been convinced by the so-called racist propaganda that supreme power is divinely deeded to dominant people who classify themselves as white. They therefore suffer anxiety attacks and feel as if they are blasphemously rebelling against God himself or herself. If they, even for a moment, seriously dare consider conspiring to wrest, W-R-E-S-T, power from the hands of their oppressor. And right here I pause, I'm thinking about a powerful quote by Steve Biko, freedom fighter of South Africa. And Biko says this, if I can recall the quote, as long, and I'm paraphrasing it right now because I can't think of the direct quote, but as long as the oppressor has control and domination and power over the mind of the people, they will never be free. It's impossible to be free. And I could say something to brother Mike check for that direct quote, but I don't have it before me now. It'll come to me hopefully before I end this episode. But Biko stated once again about the most, I got it now, it's coming in a way better, the most powerful weapon of any oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. That's any oppressor. Anyone who's oppressing an individual or group of people, the most powerful weapon of that oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Because when someone has the mind and the consciousness of an individual or a group of people, they have their allegiance, they have their all. And most of us, we read in the biblical verse, I'm paraphrasing once again, where it say, love the supreme power that we call God with all your mind and all your heart and all your soul. So if an oppressor in this three-dimensional has control and domination over our minds, that's their most powerful weapon. Not guns, bombs, and tanks. Our so-called individual socialized mind. Think over that. And Dr. King himself said, as long as the mind is enslaved, this is a direct quote, as long as the mind is enslaved, the body can never be free. What do you mean by the body? The hands, the physical self, can never do the things of a free-thinking individual or people. So the body is not free, even though we can walk and move about, fly here, go there, drive there. But if the mind is enslaved, the body is not free to function and operate like a free mind. Once again, it's a spiritual, mathematical, and scientific impossibility. Think over that. You may not agree with me. Furthermore, with the quote, and I bring this episode to a close. More unfortunate than this sorely mistaken theological perception is the self-abnegating perception by many so-called black people that they are inherently capable of mounting a successful campaign against their oppressor, and therefore must suckingly seek the least onerous accommodation to it. This perception of an orientation towards power on the part of African people is but a prescription for their unending subordination, exploitation, and ultimately, when it is convenient to the purposes of their oppressors, their genocidal demise. Think over that. Therefore, if they or we are to survive and prosper in freedom, then like it or not, African people, indigenous people, aboriginal people, any people, and particularly I'm talking about African people, but the idea applies to any people, must come to terms with power. Must come to terms with power. And that's why I raised the question at the beginning, or this topic, what is power? The ability and the capacity to do. And as Dr. Claude Anderson stated, is the ability to get things done despite and in spite of resistance and opposition of others. Think over that. And success is already built into our spiritual genetic makeup. When that one sperm out of billions and trillions of sperm connect with that egg, or even before it connect with that egg, when it travels up the fallopian tube, and that one is successful in connecting with that egg, and that became you and I. That's success. That's power already in our nature, because each of, as a so-called individual, we would not be here if that didn't happen. If that sperm didn't prevail over all the other billion or trillion, however many it is, and connected with the egg, the ovum with that egg, and became you and I. That's power and success already in our spiritual genetic makeup. To be and to do and to prevail. Think over that. Go down into the deep recesses of your subconscious mind. Plant that seed. Let it germinate and bear fruit. We living in a time when we must wake up and we must utilize our inner power, our personal power, in conjunction, harmony and balance and maturity with others in terms of a collectivity. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't be psyched out. Don't be in denial. Go into some quiet meditation and reflection. And reflect on all these things as your Bible tells you, informs you. Think over that. And finally, we must ever be conscious of the fact that the quote-unquote establishment, whatever rewards it gives us, will also, if necessary, to maintain its control, kill us. Think over that. If it's necessary to maintain its power of oppression, its power of domination, its power of exploitation, its power of degradation. Whatever rewards it may give, ultimately it may kill you and I. Think over that. What's going on now? As Marvin Gaye, asked the question, like, what's going on? Think over that. What's happening in the world today? What's happening in our neighborhoods? What's happening with our individual selves? What's happening? What's going on? Our so-called very life itself and existence is at stake. That's what's going on. That's what's happening. What are we gonna do? What's the brother who sung the song? I think it was Wilson Pickett, sitting on the dock of the bay. Might not have been him, but I think it was. We gonna just sit on the dock of the bay, watching the damn tide go away? Is that what we're gonna do? That would be, if we do that and continue to do that, that would be a betrayal, in my opinion, of the ancestors in the cosmos and the ancestors that dwells within each of us as so-called individuals. We're betraying that. And not only will we betray the ancestors that live and have their beingness within us and throughout the universe, we will also be betraying the beautiful ones yet unborn. Those who are born now and live and exist right now and are being raised up, are growing up, and the beautiful ones yet unborn, yet to be. That will be a gross betrayal. That would be a gross betrayal of life itself, of our individual and collective power potential, power capabilities with an S on. Think of that. Dwell on these things. Go into the upper room of your mentality and do some, once again, as I continue to say, do some quiet meditation and reflection. Be reborn to that understanding. Because none of us are going back into the womb of our mother. Be born mentally and spiritually. Be regenerated mentally and spiritually. Be uplifted, acquired an elevated, more enlightened understanding. And I end by saying, thank you for listening, and hope to hear from you. Make some comments and join us on a continuation of this theme about power and other matters. But I humbly say, Amani, as I said in the beginning, Amani na upendo, that's peace and love. And I give thanks, Brother Willie Colbert, quote unquote Mike Check, for his expertise, his understanding, his knowledge, his know-how, not only just in these recordings, but in many other avenues of life. To give thanks, gratitude. And it's not only what we call a blessing, but it's blissfulness coming out of the backwoods, the muddy waters, sugar ditches, mosquito swamps, and dirt roads, and so forth and so on. Cotton fields, y'all know the lingo. Of Greenville and Delta, Mississippi. Peace out. Amani, Naopendo, Ubuntu.